We will define socialism as any system of institutional aggression on the free exercise of entrepreneurship. Note that the definition revolves entirely around the concept of aggression or coercion. The word coercion derives from the Latin coactio, coactionis, which meant the imposition of taxes, that is, the taking away of tax money from someone. What does tax imposition mean? Coercion, imposition, to impose. In other words, I am taking this from you, and if you refuse, I will hit you or throw you in jail. The payment of taxes is not voluntary. Taxation is an act of aggression or coercion. By coercion or aggression, we should understand any act of physical violence or threat of physical violence initiated by a human being or a group of human beings against another person or other people with one purpose: to force those who suffer the coercion to modify their behavior in terms of the desires of the one using violence, the one in power, the one who coerces, the one who assaults. So, to avoid greater evils, I am forced to do what you want, not what I want. Notice that the definition requires physical violence, or the threat of physical violence. We are not talking about an inner, ethereal, moral coercion, no matter how strong, such as the coercion of sin. I am a slave to sin. That is a metaphorical way of speaking. Of course, a drug addict or an alcoholic is, in a way, a slave to drugs or alcohol, and this is an inner problem the person will have to solve by other means. As social scientists, we are talking about a radically different reality, actual slavery. In other words, either you do this, or I will give you 100 lashes. Cha! Cha! And then the other person does what is demanded. Physical violence means what you see here. Is it okay if I touch you? It means there must be physical contact. Someone is hit, for instance, or a threat of physical contact. Maybe I take out a gun and say, your money or your life, or a big knife. Lady, either you let me rape you or I will kill you. Physical violence, or the threat of physical violence. Is that clear? If there is no use or threat of physical violence, then in economic terms, and in terms of our definition of socialism, there is no coercion. The action of inflicting physical violence on others so that they will do something against what they desire is a human action, but we could define it as the quintessential anti-human action, since human beings are characterized by our capacity to act freely, and if we cannot do so because we are being coerced, then that constitutes an anti-human action. We can all understand that violence is anti-human. Now, there are two types of aggression or coercion. There is the systematic or institutional type, and there is the asystematic or non-institutional type. This second type, asystematic or non-institutional coercion, is dispersed, arbitrary, and difficult to predict. It is the coercion used by a criminal, for instance. You are walking down the street, and you have bad luck, and you are mugged or raped. It can cost you your life, but such events are isolated and not organized. In fact, we will see that the market develops its own mechanisms to prevent, defend against, stop, and punish asystematic or non-institutional coercion. In any case, a distinction is rarely drawn between this type of coercion and the other type, which we will call systematic or institutional coercion. What is systematic or institutional coercion? This type is much more serious. It is state coercion. This is the coercion that gives rise to our definition of socialism. This type is characterized by its highly predictable, repetitive, methodical, and organized nature. This is coercion which is organized from above, or systematic, and institutionalized, and it leaves practically no possibility of escaping it. To give you an idea, asystematic aggression or coercion is applied by criminals. I have a stroke of bad luck. Your money or your life. Or I am raped. As for systematic, repetitive, organized coercion, think of an army of Nazis who dominate by force. I say this because these are two extremes, and I want you to visualize the difference between asystematic and systematic, organized, repetitive coercion or aggression. Though there will be differences in degrees, the type which underlies the definition I am going to give of socialism is the repetitive, organized, institutional type. Every entrepreneurial act consists of the discovery of a profit opportunity which had gone unnoticed before. And when an entrepreneur discovers, for instance, that a certain actor in the market is misusing a resource he places no value on, and that this is precisely the resource another actor in the market very urgently needs to complete the action project which will permit her to achieve the ends she so values, when this circumstance exists, there is a social maladjustment. One person is misusing a resource another person needs. They do not know each other, but there is an entrepreneur who notices the maladjustment. Every maladjustment manifests itself as a latent profit opportunity to be discovered by an entrepreneur. The first to discover and take advantage of it obtains a pure entrepreneurial profit. So the entrepreneurial light bulb goes on for me. I have a realization. And what do? I buy low here from the actor who misuses or places no value on the resource, and I sell high there to the actor who places a high value on it and needs it so urgently. I do them both a favor. The actor who considered the resource useless and even a nuisance sees now that it has a price and can be sold, and he starts to save it. Likewise, the actor who was frustrated by the inability to achieve her end due to a lack of this resource finds it available, since I can provide her with it. I buy for 3 and sell for 10. I make an entrepreneurial profit of 7. And what is more, everyone involved comes out ahead. The important point is that the entrepreneurial act produces 3 essential effects. First, the creation of information. I depict this as a light bulb that goes on over the head of the entrepreneur. This effect consists of realizing something we had previously failed to notice. We see a maladjustment, discoordination. We notice that one actor is squandering something another needs. When I make this discovery, information I did not have before appears in my mind, and therefore the entrepreneurial act is markedly creative. But the creation of information is not the only effect. There is also a transmission of information. To transmit something to someone is to cause that person to discover in his mind part of the information which I have previously discovered or created in mine. When I discover that profit opportunity, I act entrepreneurially to take advantage of it, and I buy low and sell high. When I approach the actor who has been misusing the resource, and I offer to buy it from him, I am transmitting to him the message, listen, there is a new demand for that resource. And when I sell it at a higher price to the actor who so urgently needs it, I am transmitting to her the message, go ahead, continue with your project. Do not be frustrated. You can culminate your action plan because the resource you lacked is available. I am offering it to you. I transmit information. Furthermore, in the market, information is transmitted very efficiently and concisely because the vast majority of such transactions are reflected in market prices. A market price is the historical ratio of exchange at which a deal is made or closed. If I buy for 3 and sell for 10, it is noted that in certain historical circumstances, so many units of a particular resource were purchased for 3 monetary units and later sold for 10. This historical information remains and can be monitored, digested, reinterpreted, and used by thousands of other entrepreneurs in their subsequent action projects. Market prices are the raw material, so to speak, which entrepreneurs use for their later action projects. Prior to my entrepreneurial act, there was no market price for that resource. Following my entrepreneurial act, there is. To one of the agents involved, I have transmitted the message, be careful, save that resource, because there is a demand for it elsewhere. And to the other, you can go ahead, because here is the resource. I am offering it to you. Likewise, many other entrepreneurs are eager to spot profit opportunities, and they take note of these historical events, this buying and selling, and these prices, and they use the information in their own subsequent action projects. We could say that the information I create as an entrepreneur is transmitted in successive waves throughout the market, in a highly efficient and concise manner, via the data that are market prices. And when any of us embarks on an entrepreneurial project, when we draw up a budget, plan our actions, and do our calculations, one of the basic items we consider is the market price. If I have to rent an office, I find out how much it costs in this neighborhood to rent an office that has the characteristics and more or less the amount of floor space I need. If I think I need a secretary or some other kind of worker, I find out what the normal market wages are. I am actually focusing on historical data, though this data may come from the recent past, yesterday, last week, a month ago, or from a friend or acquaintance. But as a result, information is transmitted which I reuse and recombine in my future action projects. So, the second essential effect of the entrepreneurial act is the transmission of information, and it influences not only those directly involved in the entrepreneurial act, but also a myriad of other economic agents who monitor prices, bear them in mind, and use them for their future actions. Every entrepreneurial act produces a third essential effect as well, and that consists of coordination or adjustment. As a result of the entrepreneurial act, two people who had been acting without the other's knowledge, that is, in a completely maladjusted or discoordinated manner from a social standpoint, learn motu proprio, which is the best way possible to learn since they believe they are pursuing their own ends. They both learn to discipline their behavior in terms of the needs of the other. Indeed, the economic agent who does not value the resource and misuses and squanders it basically feels like he has won the lottery when I approach him and offer to buy it from him. Each of us learns to discipline his behavior in terms of the needs of others. And we do this not because some dictator or government department has issued a command and ordered us to do it. We do it because it is in our own interest, because we receive a market price. The third effect of the entrepreneurial act, coordination and adjustment, is what explains the existence of society understood as a social process of coordination. And from the time we get up in the morning until the time we go to bed at night, we are all disciplining our behavior in terms of others' needs. Thanks to the milkman, we have milk at home, and we can have breakfast. Thanks to the newspaper deliverer, we can read the papers. Thanks to others, we can get dressed and travel to school. All of our needs are satisfied thanks precisely to this third effect of the entrepreneurial act, coordination. Therefore, it should now be obvious to us that if, in any area of social life, human beings are prevented by force from making free exchanges through our entrepreneurial alertness, then none of these three effects will appear. Since I cannot act, because I am prevented by force from acting, for instance in the capital goods sector, because these goods are publicly owned, there is no stock market. I cannot buy them. Private companies are prohibited. Buying or selling a machine is forbidden, etc. What happens? Information is not created, because I am prevented by force from acting in that sector. Information is not transmitted, and the effect of coordination or adjustment does not appear. Ultimately, this is the essential idea behind the theorem of the impossibility of socialism. Does this mean socialists are visionaries who seek to generate disorder, chaos, and violence in society? No. What socialists say is that the systematic exercise of coercion from above by a governing body will make it possible to coordinate society much more successfully than if coordination is spontaneously driven by entrepreneurship in a free market. With this in mind, we are now ready to redefine the concept of socialism as any systematic or institutional coercion or aggression which restricts the free exercise of entrepreneurship in a certain social sphere, and which is exercised by a governing body responsible for the necessary tasks of social coordination in this area. In other words, it is assumed that this hierarchically superior body that organizes society is going to be in charge of deliberately coordinating the maladjusted behaviors of the ordinary human beings who take part in the social process. Therefore, we must ask the following important scientific question. Is it possible to coordinate society from above based on coercive demands?